Hello, Campfire. Good morning. This is welcome. This is Happy New Year. Welcome back to 2022, January 7th, episode number 32 of Low Code Campfire. So we're going to kick off the new year. This is an event we hold Fridays at 10 a.m. Central Time, and all skill levels are welcome, and it's a pretty informal agenda. All the past episodes have been recorded and we put bookmarks in them, so hopefully when there's techniques or discussions you can circle back to them, and they're a good resource. We have a rough agenda. We say hi and then we'll have a first call, and then in various steps we will talk about contributions that are made to our community our common website, talk about things that are coming up, any submitted topics, and there are a ton, and open mic, so that's fun. If you've got any noise behind you, we ask that you mute your microphone. I have long threatened, since the first episode, threatened to sing, but that's only if it gets quiet, and there's been so many topics submitted we're in no danger of that today. If you have topics that you'd like to see discussed, you can use this QR code or the link that's in the invitation emails. So with the business out of the way, good morning and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Good morning,
everybody.
Happy New Year.
Good morning.
Well, we have a good group today, I see, and anyone new to the group that would like to say hello, please do. I don't think Bogdan will be joining us today, so we are unsupervised. So let's do first call. What's on your mind? What's going on? Any burning questions or issues, anything you're trying to deal with that you want to rely on the group to help you with, give suggestions?
Dale, Jerry here. I'll jump in with the first one.
Lovely, thank you.
It's a very small one, but it's kind of freaking out one of my clients. Since we put in the cleansing program, is that what we call it, where you check secure input on a form field and it ensures sanitize. Thank you. In Action Grid, if you use the search bar at the top of the grid, and I have a company named M&M, so N ampersand M, it won't search for that. It will not find it, and I'm suspicious that it might have something to do with that. But any name field or a text field that has that ampersand sign in it, and again, this is legacy data that has been around forever, and it is planned to app 1.17. But I feel like it's the sanitize program that might be blocking that or stopping that. Small thing, but just thought I'd open it up and see if anybody else has had data that has an ampersand sign in it, maybe some other character that the sanitize program might be cleansing, but it is in the data. The ampersand sign does exist. And again, for my example, the company is called M&M, and the search routine just will not find it based on that. I could put in a different part of the company name. So maybe it's called M&M Store. I could type in store and it would find it just fine.
So making sure the debugging that you've already done, you've looked at the data, and the data actually has an ampersand.
It does, yes.
Yep. So I'm concerned that maybe it's the search itself that's either sanitizing, or it's also could be treating it as a syntax, like it's trying to do A and B. Have you tried it with quotes around it, like a single quote around it?
I have not.
Yeah, and I mean, end users typically wouldn't do that anyway, but I don't know that that's the case, but I'm just
we have many of our tables, even in the DNN users table, We have people put in the first name column, Jerry and Dale. They put stuff like that in, and then suddenly that little search feature doesn't seem to find it too well. But it's a small thing. Don't stress over it. But I just didn't know if that was something we had seen before.
Anybody else run into that? Well, I've taken it down as a thing to look at. I mean, trying to figure out what the best practice around doing that is. How to, I mean, you could well have ampersands in the data, or left and right angle brackets and things like that it would be valid to search for. So I'll take it as a challenge to mirror the team.
No worries. And just for the record, I did try to sneak around it by doing the whatever that code is, the left hand or the greater less than bracket and whatever it's called, and a semicolon. It didn't seem to make any difference. It just as it's almost like the search bar. When you click on search or you type into it, it just says, oh, there's a bad character in here. I'm not even going to try.
Yep.
It doesn't bring back wrong data. It just stalls right there.
And you remember that this did work previously.
It did.
Search.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, it did.
You could temporarily disable the cleansing to see if that was actually the problem.
So the sanitize, as far as I know, is happening at the data level, at the form, right?
Right.
For data input. But if the data is actually getting an ampersand in it, then it's not the sanitize that's getting you.
I'm running a quick test as we're talking, and what I'm finding is that the ampersand is appears briefly in the URL and then gets removed. It would need to be encoded, because obviously ampersand is an important character in a URL. But what I'm seeing is that it's being removed, and any text I type after the ampersand doesn't get put into the URL.
What if you turn off sync with URL? This is great. Thanks for being on board.
Yeah.
I can't walk and chew gum at the same time. So
Yeah.
being able to test while I'm talking about it. I will say that I saw a few versions back, and I haven't gone after it, where like if you had an email address that was searchable, that the @ sign might be one of those characters that also makes it crazy. So, and I haven't, like I say, I haven't tested that in a new version, so I'll get into that.
It was a I turned off sync with URL. So let me well, okay, so here's the issue now, is that so it's not syncing with URL anymore, but I don't have data to return. I'm not sure. I guess I need to add a record that has an ampersand in it. So
All right. Well, if you get an answer while we're online, it'd be great.
sure.
If not, we'll chase it after and come back to it. So that's a great first call. Anyone else?
Lastly, on that very topic is, I'll go do the research on that for you now. I'll go out to my website where there is data in the system. I'll turn off the sync with URL, and I'll report back to you later in this meeting what I find.
Oh, perfect. Great.
A new question?
Yeah.
It's sort of a newbie question. Not that I'm not that new, except that I don't do this every day. I have an older site that has action form and action grid and my token. It's I think 503 or something is the version. I wanted to move it up to plan an app, and started looking through the process, reading the docs that are there. The big question is, in upgrading it, Dale, you had suggested that I install the matching version of Plan an App. So if it's 5 something, that it should be, or 513, it should be the 513, and then climb up from there. That makes sense. But what about if I were to start with trying to upgrade these guys in the the standard action form install and the standard action grid install and get them higher up before shifting over to plan an app. How high of a jump can I make? Do I need to start at the next rev and then upgrade incrementally one after the other, or can you jump from 503 to 518 and
So,
then grab the latest?
So we get that question pretty frequently and have a pretty good handle on it. It's really one of the main reasons behind our one-click installer in Plant an App, because the path is, first of all, with regard to versions, there's kind of a very specific path. And if you are older than version 5, then you got to get to the highest release of 5.0 on all the products that are installed, and then 5.1, and then 5. I think it's 6, and then 5.12. There's a pretty specific step. You don't have to do all of the releases, but you do have to do specific ones in order to avoid the problem. And so we're in order to avoid upgrade problems. Where you get into trouble is that, or what is so onerous about that, is that if you have 5 products installed and you've got to take all of them to 5.0 highest, each install takes several minutes depending on the size of the site, and then it just becomes a kind of a big deal, and just a time investment. So, but there really isn't a way to do it. If you to go around it. If you have a 5.0 and you install 5.13, it will blow up because there were changes. There were changes to DLLs in the middle, and that are shared in common. You might be able to get away with it with a site that has only one product on it, but if you've got 2, right? So, I'm probably answering more than you're asking, but if you have 2, like Action Form, Action Grid, and you jump all the way to 5.13 with Action Form. Now Action Grid was relying on an older DLL that's not there anymore and will blow up, and it blows up your site. So we made allowances for that as we step through, and so you have to go these stepping stones. My recommendation is open a support case and tell us, Mihai will do this with you too, tell us what version, all the products you have installed, and all the what version of DNN you're starting at, and we can write out a set of instructions that has all the downloads and all.
No, okay, that's great. Yeah, I don't mind the time that it takes to install over and over and over again, climbing up the versions. What I do mind is the fear of blowing it up if I do it the wrong way. So
yep.
Yeah,
and so now there's a great time to talk about production versus test and backups, right? When we do this, we take a clone of a site. The ideal is you take a clone of the site, you work through this process so that you have, because I've seen it happen, and I've done it myself. You're doing the right things, but as the site blows up anyway, and I understand the fear of that. So you've got to have a plan. One of the plans is if you do it on a clone and you write down the steps and you do it one by one and succeed, then you can have a pretty good confidence that it's going to work right on production. If you're doing it directly to production, even with a clone, because there's so many steps, what I tend to do is take backups intermediate. So if I get a quarter of the way through all the things I'm going to do, snap another backup, at least I don't have to start over again. So working your way up. If you're doing it with production, it's like guaranteed you've got to have a great backup and be prepared to use it if something blows up.
Right, makes sense.
Lest I leave a new viewer with the idea that all of this is unstable, the DNN environment allows lots of different modules, some that are within, you know, some that we're publishing, some that others are publishing. Lots of times we run into whether it's a very old DNN that has odd things in the web config that need to be fixed, whether it's an incompatibility with another product. There's just so much going on. If it were clean, it would be easy, but it's not.
Dale, I have a question related to this.
Yes,
Might
sir.
help Don as well. But since he's planning on moving into Plant and App, could we install the app builder to handle the sequence of upgrading?
Yes, but you've got to get to a version of App Builder that's appropriate, right? So if you, for example, one of the things we recommend is that you get all of the modules up to 5.12 and then install the 1.12 App Builder. And then from there, you can go use the one-click install to go to 13, 14, 15, and up. And that will work great. You just can't have a mixed system. And let's say you can't have a 5.0 system and put on App Builder 5.12 and expect it to work. It won't. You've got to get it to where it is expecting it, and then to where it's consistent. The other thing in the DNN Sharp world that's been, you know, a long-term problem is that clients have a tendency to install only the things that they want, and sometimes it works, right? So you can have a 5.0 action form and a 5.6 action grid, and maybe it works and they're happy, but that incompatibility, I mean, we expect 5.6 of everything if you have 5.6. So that's part of the weird circumstances that make it hard to reliably upgrade. You've got to get everything to the same version and then stair step them. And now, you know, the final plug for Plant and App is that the one-click installer installs all of these all at once with, you know, with only one system restart, and all of the modules in that release are tested together. So a lot of the incompatibilities that happen when people have mixed modules just go away in the Plant and App environment.
Are the back versions of modules that are going to be no longer supported, like Action Grid, My Tokens, are the back install versions still going to be available? Because if we want to upgrade, we're going to need to step up in those increments, and we're going to need to have those files.
Right. We have no plans to make them unavailable that I'm aware of. Right. So yeah, they're all the old builds are there, and anybody that wants to get to Plant and App, we're gonna do anything we can to help them. Right. So, but it does bring up a good point that as we get farther and farther away from, you know, as we get to version 1.24 of Plant and App, will there be a nice upgrade path? At some point, that may not be true. Right now, there is an upgrade path that's reliable. You can get there. Since we're talking upgrades, Mark, did you see that I found an article, Mihai found an article about getting out of 9.4?
Yes, thank you. I saw that right as I was logging into the meeting today. Yeah.
Yep. So
Haven't read it yet. Thank you.
Hopefully, you bet. Yeah, that was all Mihai. I didn't even know it was out there. So hopefully that'll provide some light on how to do that and get Persona Bar back.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other burning issues? First call issues?
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question.
Yep.
Some of you who might have seen the community site might know that I'm attempting to create announcements that I want to be able to show on any other website, DNN or otherwise. My first thought was to create iframes, or the code that would create an iframe and distribute that. It appears that that's going to be a problem because browser changes and security changes, not allowing third-party cookies. So can someone suggest a different way to distribute, to get my announcements on other websites that don't involve an iframe or an embed?
mean, have you considered it? I don't know if this, I don't know, I don't know all the requirements, but have you considered using an API on your site that that you call and pull the data in?
Well, I had not until Dale suggested it just last night. So thank
Oh,
you for both of you. It's a good idea. I have played with that and I have some success. Um, the uh, the question that is a natural outcome of starting that project is, can I, how reliable is it that I could provide a API call to other websites and say, hey, I just dropped this in and let it run? You know, is there going to be problems? Are people going to have problems running it reliably? Different platforms? I don't know the answer to that question.
I don't think so. So long as you're, I mean, at that point, you're not relying on any cookies or cross scripting, whatever. It's just, it's the security of the API. So, and people run API calls all the time without problems. I don't think you're going to have problems with that, right? If you set up, for example, if you set your API to be public, or if you're letting people, for example, you could do any of the API security keys, or you know, if you want to make it limited, you could apply the API security. But if you you know, use that snippet of Jquery that it produces and pass in your whatever key you need in order to get out data, I think it's going to reliably return.
Right, but is that actually jQuery? Because what if a site's not using that jQuery? That should be rewritten in JavaScript.
I think that jQuery is running on the browser. So when you, as far as I know, it's going to be reliable to recall.
I'd agree. The one other thing that I would say is that, you know, it's also about whoever you give that to knowing what to do with the data. You know, assuming that they, you know, once they get the data, they know what to, you know, where to put the data. You know, so that's on them, that part.
Yeah, that part I'm writing that off in my mind only because I would have had to done the same thing if I'd handed them an iframe or an embed code. I still would have had to explain where to put this and how to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So I think that is the same issue regardless of the approach. But Dale, are you saying that that jQuery runs in the browser regardless of whether you've got it installed on your site?
Yes, I think that this code, I mean, basically, if you, I believe this, and I'm not great at it, right? There's, I wish Ben.
Well, there's also the curl code option too.
But if you were to put this into into something to get run, you know, like a it's inside of a script tag in the HTML element, you would be able to run the Ajax call and get a return and do stuff with it, right? So I believe it's running on the browser at that point. So I think there is code that you can give to somebody to say, display this script on your, and you could probably even do it as an include, right? You could put the script on your server and let them load the script remotely. So you don't even, that's better than distributing the scripts, because then you can change it, right? So,
I'm not familiar with that, so yeah, maybe sometime I'd like to.
Couldn't you paste that into a console and just to test it, just take that code and open a browser window and put it in a console and
yeah, it works, but you have to yeah, like I could test it as an alert or as a console log. Yeah, but that works. I've already done it.
So with the script tag, you can support the SRC parameter. So that points it to a URL. So you could put a URL on your site with the JavaScript, and then what you're handing them is a script tag that says script source pointing back to your URL, and then it's going to load and run that JavaScript. I mean, you know, I'm not, again, I'm not a JavaScript expert, but I believe you'll be able to have it on your site and load it into their browser, and it would display this stuff. So it's the same thing. So, you know, going back to your original, you're going to do an action form that was posted, you know, embedded on other sites. That I think was a great answer, and the fact that there are, you know, that there are security issues is something that I'm asking the team to look into. I think that's a great solution, and for, you know, it's probably the direction I would have gone first, because I don't really want to get into JavaScript. I like the easier patterns, even if it is a little bit more overhead. So in that scenario, you turn on embed, you get a bit of JavaScript that you still hand to the other sites that you want it to be, and it'll run. Unfortunately, it doesn't run on other sites at this point. So
Yeah, I agree that would the embed that comes right out of action form would be awesome if it's future proofed.
yep. So we're looking into whether or not that will be an answer.
It ought to be able to be done, because Google Forms can do it. You know, YouTube can embed anywhere. So it seems like it's been worked out.
Yep.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. What else? See, I knew we were not in danger of running out of topics today.
I ran I don't know, Jerry, if you've gotten there yet, but I did run a test of
I did.
some data, and it worked for me. Did it work for you?
It did.
Yeah.
Unsyncing with the URL fixed that problem.
Yeah.
So syncing with URL is not compatible with some special characters.
Yeah, I wonder if it's possible that that the code could you know, put an encoded ampersand in the URL, but it's you know, something for us to consider.
Yeah, I'm taking a note. I like it when
Yeah.
Bogdan shows up, because usually he'll take a note, but I've taken that down to bring to the team. Good one. So asked and answered. I love it. So I'm gonna go off to Campfire here, our Campfire shared website. If anybody who's attending this meeting wants to be part of this, they can. The idea is that you can contribute and see what other people contribute within the site. So this is different solutions rather than just having them on a video. You can actually open them up and take a look at them. So I did one, this was in response to a question from Matt. This was dynamic questions and answers. And I mentioned this on Cafe earlier in the week. So this is a dynamic form that, so we're asking these 5 questions about contact info questions, right? And we're even providing defaults and things like that. And it's coming from a query out of the database. We'll look at it in a minute on how that's put together. But the JSON that's behind these is that we're getting an ID, 3, a field code of home phone, a section of contact info, a rank of 5, a question of what is your home phone number, and we're using this data to ask questions. And this form is set up so, for example, I can click and stay on this same dynamic questions and answers form, but ask for the security info section, and I get different questions to be answering. And if I answer these questions and I hit save, the result is a nice PDF that has the questions and the answers in it. So we're not only asking dynamic questions, but then the second part of the problem, what do you do with them? How do you parse through them? So just to clarify, this questions JSON would not typically be displayed to your end users. I'm just doing that to demonstrate the technique. And there are more than one ways to do this. So I am, don't say that. I'm not holding this out as this is the only way to do things. So let me get logged into the site. Campfire. And so just kind of running through the parts and pieces of this, I'm going to start with, well, let's take a look at the form. Get that opened up in a new window, a new tab. And so the first thing that we're doing, on the events, we have to get the questions that we're going to answer, questions that we're going to ask. And I am doing this out of a thing called app question. So let's take a look at, I'm going to open a window for our configuration and take a look at the entities behind question. So I have, I think this is it. So I have my questions that have data like field code, section, rank, question, default answer. But these are the questions that I might want to ask, and note that I have some that are security info, some that are contact info. And you could add more types here if you wanted to, more sections. So if you want to ask a section of if I want to ask the contact info, I'm going to pass a key of contact info, security info. So in order to do this, one part of this is that we have to get a list of items, and I'm creating a list from SQL where I'm selecting all those fields from the app question, and I am only getting the ones that match the section I care about. The section parameter I'm actually getting from the URL. So get : section gets the section parameter from the URL. I like get better than query string because I'm lazy and it's shorter. And then I'm using the default. If there's no section provided in the URL, then it's going to prompt for contact info. So this is going to give me a Plimpton app list of all of the questions that I want to ask. So the next thing is I have to, I'm going to use an execute actions for each list entry, which is going to let me loop through all the questions in the, sorry for scooting around here. The output of this first one was questions list. So I'm going to loop through the questions list and do stuff. And in this case, do stuff, very simple. I have one action. I'm going to add a text box to my dynamic form. So this add text box is in the dynamic. Let's see, what's the section? Let me make sure I'm dynamic fields. There's all these different kinds of form fields that you can add, and I'm adding a text box for each. And so this is defining the questions that are going to be asked. This is putting the questions onto the dynamic form. So what you have to do is, of course, I have a description, but the container ID, this is the name of the dynamic container. And just, I'm going to scoot back up to my fields. I created a dynamic field container. This is the thing that's going to hold all of my questions, and it's called field container. So you have to have a dynamic field container on the form in order for that to work. And so that matches, sorry, this field container. So I'm telling it where I want to put this question in the field container. The field ID is coming from my questions list field code. Field title is coming from the actual question field. And then if there's a default answer, it's going into the initial value. So that's all it takes to get these on the screen, right? And so closing this up, so we can see what more clearly we get a list of questions that we want answered, and then we loop through those questions and push them onto the dynamic container. And then the last step I'm going to do, and this is useful in parsing the information, somehow you have to know when they hit the save button what questions to go through. And so I am creating a JSON object. I'm converting the questions list, converting that list into JSON and putting it on the form, typically in a hidden field, and calling it I'm putting it into something called questions, and I'm putting my questions list into the questions. The result of that is questions JSON. This technique, and again, I have a field called questions JSON. Normally that would be a hidden field, but now I'm just using it as a visible so that you can see it. But that's taking that list that I used to build the form and saving it where I can get to it again when they hit save, because that questions list that we create here, when we create this question list, only exists for the moment that we're in the pre-init phase, and then it disappears. So it's not going to be around when you hit save unless you take steps to save it. So in my case, I put it on a hidden form, a hidden field on the form, and so it's going to be around for me to use later. Another technique, I said there was other ways to do this. Another technique would be when they hit save, you could re-execute the SQL and go get the same list that you did before. That way you wouldn't have to pass it on the form, but in some way you have to know what's inside that dynamic container. So then everything that I've done there results in this. We have our questions in the dynamic container, and we have our questions list JSON out there ready for us to use when you hit save. So then the save piece of the puzzle, and I'm just going to go through this quickly. I don't know how much anybody cares, but it was pretty useful. I think it's useful to document and have available. So again, the fields on the form, we have this dynamic container that has all our questions. We have this hidden field, and we have a save button. So all the rest of the logic to process this is going into the save button. And so when people hit save, these are the steps that result in that PDF that we got. The first thing that I did was this hidden field. I wanted to turn that back into I wanted to be able to turn that back into a list. And so the first thing I have to do is when I put it out here, the list part is actually from this bracket to this other bracket, but I put it, when I created it, it created something called, I created it with and put it into a JSON object called questions. So I have to reverse that. So I'm taking that field and putting it into something called queue. So now I can create a list from queue questions. This ends up getting us the same list into questions list that I had in the first place. So this is my reverse the process, get the field off the form. And again, you could have queried the SQL database and gotten the questions list again if you wanted to do it that way. From there, I am creating some output HTML, an output HTML token that's going to end up being on my PDF. So I'm just creating it with these values were submitted and a couple of breaks. And then I'm looping through my question list again. I've got this question list, and now I can use it to get fields off the form. So every time I have a question, it's looping through everything in the question list. I can loop through it, and I'm adding to the output HTML the question that was asked, right? I'm still able to get that off of the questions list that I provided. I can also get the field code, which might be useful, like if you're trying to write things to the database. I'm not actually using it other than to display it. And then the interesting one is this one. This is saying I'm using the field code, which is a value like city born, but that's the name that got put into as the ID for this field when we created it. So now I can, whoops, so sorry that I'm navigating around here. So now this much will evaluate to the field code, city born, and then the second set of brackets will return the value of that thing. And I've set my number of recursions to 2, so it will run this twice, so it'll evaluate the first one and the second one. We'll end up with the value as part of, that's how we return the value that's in that field and all the information about it. I encourage you to get part if you're, I mean, you really got to just open this up and look at it. But the result of that then is output HTML gets, we're adding on to it one row after the other. We're adding a break at the end. So output HTML ends up just being all the HTML we want to put on the PDF. We generate the PDF using output HTML, and it's creating a PDF name called form result that we're keeping the relative URL. And then finally, we're just redirecting to relative URL with force download. So that triggers sending the output to the screen. So when we prompt for contact info, we get so this form result PDF is a completely different one than the other one. It has different questions and our field codes, our IDs. So that's dynamic fields, dynamic content in and out. Is any of that valuable to anybody? Have you all done that before?
It was extremely valuable to me. I was able to get, as you know, my community question, I got to the point of being able to build a dynamic form and get the JSON string out, but was this whole process of storing it at a hidden token on a hidden field, reconstituting it, recycling it, and then writing it. That was the magic. So thank you very much, Dale.
Are there any known limitations to using the dynamic form? Like, could you put that into a pop-up and stuff and build all that in a pop-up?
Yeah, it's still a form, right? So absolutely could go into a pop-up.
Yeah, because I could see in a data validation scenario where somebody's leaving out a chunk of data where, you know, hey, you missed the mobile phone number field and that's required. Put it in a pop-up.
Yep, I could see doing that as a pattern.
Yeah, Dale, just to chime in, I thought it was valuable too. I've used the dynamic forms. That's good stuff.
So within, you know, the kind of next level stuff, if you, when we created this is the place where we created each list entry, right? And so all I did was add text box. But if you want to be next level about it, there are other things that you can do in dynamic fields, like add a checkbox, or you know, any of the other, many of the other field types are supported. So you could do this conditionally, right? If your underlying data had what kind of a field do I want, you could say, well, if the desired, and I don't, let's see, this would be, I mean, I'm making stuff up, right? But it could be something like if the field type equals text box, then it creates a text box, and then this one would be if the field type equals checkbox. And so you could support adding many different kinds of fields all in the same one. You just have to support, you know, every different one that might be in your underlying data, wherever that was here. Sorry. So you know, if you had field type as part of this data, you could make it be that way. Also, I think I have applied this rank as so you can make sure the questions come out in the order that you want to, because you're selecting them off the list in that order. So that's kind of next level where you could go with that. Any other questions about dynamic forms?
I think we may have talked about this on this call before, but I just wanted to make sure that if anybody is curious and has taken the exam or the quizzes on the Academy, they're built with using the dynamic fields. So that's how those the quizzes and the exam are built. And the difference there is that when you select an answer, your answer is being immediately saved to the database using an API. That's what's happening on the Academy.
Well, that's clever. So we're that's content that's not part of adding the field. So no, on change. It's probably part of the on change.
Yep, it is. It's in the on change for the dynamically created field. Correct. Yep.
So in other words, you don't have to hit the submit button to save your answer.
No, that's correct. Yep. Yeah. By the time you finish the or as soon as you answer, your answers are being saved to the database, and by the time you finish, you know, everything's in the database already, and yeah. And if you change an answer, you know, the JavaScript runs again and updates that same record.
Yeah, and that's a neat pattern, you know, for forms. I think Mark has used stuff like that. I think I've seen where it's happening immediately or after a brief delay, and that saves. You know, it's one way to save things as they go. So that's an interesting pattern, different topic.
Patrick, is that documented anywhere? Do you know?
No, I don't think so. But I could probably put an example up on the Campfire site.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah,
I was thinking kind of like I do loan applications where you can you hide and show like maybe a set of questions and just use the same page, because now I'm using tabs and, you know, cycling through 30 different tabs, which is working great. But I'm wondering if this is a little more cleaner where I can hide, you know, if I have 3 questions and once they're done with that third question, hide those 3 and show 2 more.
And I would say yes. And the nice thing about that too would be that the questions that you show could be conditional on the answers from the previous ones.
And that was going to be my follow-up question. Yep, perfect.
Yeah, because there's no sense in asking people. I hate going to the doctor's office and filling out stuff that I filled out before. Right?
Already, yep.
So if you've already got the answer to that question, then just, you know, you could fill it in as a default if you need it on a different form, or you could just skip asking it. You know,
So a clarification, please. Are you talking about hiding and showing fields that have already been created, or are you talking about dynamically creating the next set of fields on demand?
I was talking specifically about the second part of that. If he's talking about having different tabs, instead you would, you know, you answer this set of questions, you advance, that next set of questions could be conditional.
And could the panel that you need to put on the actual form where these questions go in, I forgot what it was called, could you hide and show that? Because you could have, you know, 5 panels on, and these are the dynamic field container. Can you hide and show containers? So that container would only contain the 4 fields, and the next container would have the next 5, but just then hide and show those containers.
Yeah, the containers I think have conditions on them, right?
Right there, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yes. Don't they need to fill their contents when the form opens?
So right, the fields that are on the form need to be the form needs to be initialized for the logic to run to put the fields on the form.
But if the show was off, yeah, they're all initializing at once. Yeah, I get that. It may take 5 seconds to load or 2 seconds, whatever that time is, but then it's hidden until I show it.
Yep, so
Right,
you-
but then the contents of form B, in order to be contingent on the answers of form A inside
no,
the same
agreed.
form.
Yeah, there would have to be some workaround. I was just trying to get high level, but yeah, Mark, I know exactly what you're saying.
And you could, if everybody was on the Low Code Cafe on Wednesday, you know that you can use the JavaScript API to do that initialization, so that your page doesn't reload.
Yeah,
There you go.
Yeah.
perfect. Or to pull that, I like what Patrick said, using the API once they complete the file to push that to a database. And then I could grab that data on the next panel when it opens to run another quick API to grab that data if I needed it for that panel.
Patrick, your comment, the API, I was thinking like doing it with an Ajax. That would be to make like an Ajax call so you could build the next set of questions without having to do a full post back. Is that what you're going towards with that your statement?
Well, I was specifically talking about the fact that if there was another form, you without reloading the page, you could use the JavaScript API for to initialize a form, and so then that form would use the new parameters that are being passed to it, so that it has the correct questions on it. That's what I was thinking.
So in that context, you're talking about two forms, not two dynamic field containers in one form.
Right, and I guess I thought that we had said something about two forms, but with the with the dynamic field containers, that would get a little trickier if you were reinitializing the form that you're in already.
So would it be easier to do the forms and have 5 or 6 form modules instead of the field container modules? Have the form modules, then that would be easier to hide and show and initialize and all that good stuff.
You could do that, and you could use the feature of having a submit button that is able to pull data from multiple forms
And reinitialize. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
I think, again, I'm kind of back to where I ended on Low Code Cafe the other day. There's these, there's simple design patterns that Plant an App provides. You can just build multiple forms and go on. And then there's these more advanced ones where you could have a dynamic entry form that asks questions, one at a time or one set at a time. And then, then there's next level. If you want to do it and roll your own, you can have it, stay on one page, initialize dynamically, pop-ups. I mean, you can achieve what you want to, and it's all depending on, your level of what you need it to do and how much you care to invest to make it do exactly what you want. Is that a fair way to say that?
Yeah.
I tend to look, my default place is to use the patterns that are provided, but I know that's not real world for some of you. So it's worth investing in and I loved, for example, Jim's comment of looking for missing data, right? Pop up a form, dynamically ask for the piece that's missing. I'd love to see that pattern in play.
Yeah, I want to chime in on the dynamic form concept. Just one more thing. I have used it to display data in a unique presentation style that would not have worked in a grid. So, if I want this next to that and I want this to be in between, underneath, and all that, you can use a dynamic form as a presentation tool or as a reporting mechanism. Yeah, I just put all my content in static boxes in the dynamic environment. So just want to throw that out there. You can misuse it for your own purpose.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you ever wanted to show that, we could set it up.
Maybe
Just trying to wrap my head around that, what you were saying, Mark.
Oh, well, it came in real handy on a particular project. I just wanted to display it in a very precise way. And still have it be dynamic. Like I was doing a church service, like service 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock, but the contents inside the announcements had to be different, had to be unique for each service. And sometimes there's 5 services, sometimes there's 3. So it had to be dynamic and it had to be presented just so. It worked out really nice.
Yeah, so bringing up the dynamic fields that you can add, you know, static text is one of them. I suspect that might have been what you were using.
That's what I'm doing. Yep.
But you could add a static text and then dynamically fill that up with what you want to. There's also, and it requires some playing around a little bit, but like I did the dynamic field container as a full width kind of a thing. In my layout, the field container is full width. If you shorten it, and hopefully I haven't messed, oh, I did. I mean, I messed this up now. Hang on, let me undo what I've done in my events, because I put in I think I added a conditional here that's going to keep anything from working, and we didn't actually do checkbox, so I got to get rid of that. But you know, you get a completely different layout side by side if it doesn't fill. If like I changed that to be a 6 wide instead of a 12 wide, and so instead of stacking, you get side by side. So there's some things you're going to have to play with there, and I suspect Mark also managed to incorporate that into the way that he added static text.
And I assume if you shrink that screen down like it's on a mobile or a smaller screen, it will adjust.
That's a great question. Whoops. Well,
It said because the underlying form is handling it.
Yeah, so it goes to stacked at some point, and see if I can put that back into the lineup here. Managed to get it off the screen. So I don't need that anymore. These settings come into play, so you know a top aligned label will give a different result too. And
yep.
So you know there's a lot of playing that you can do to get the impact that you want. You can use multiple field containers as well. So
Cool. In
Yes,
your dynamic forms field options, there was a load questions from JSON at the bottom. Is that?
I'm sorry, in the dynamic field container itself? Oh, in the list of dynamic fields. Yes. So that was a great one. Let me find that. When we are in our, so here we add text box, but in dynamic fields, there's load dynamic field from JSON. So if you were to save any, if you were to get the JSON of any one of these things, like export action here and copy it, I believe that this is the way that you would use that. So you could dynamic field, make sure I got the right thing, add fields, load from JSON, and you could use that same, you could use the same kind of JSON to build the field. I believe that's the correct way. And so if you had your fields stored as JSON, or if it made sense to you to build them dynamically instead of in a static way, you could use that technique to do that. But it still has to be one of the ones that we support.
Like if you that was a drop down and you wanted different criteria to fill the drop down, you'd have to build the JSON, but you could do it.
Yep. And let's see if we dynamic fields add drop down. What is it? Multiple choice with drop down. So yeah, so I mean, so of course, one way to do it is to, you know, use a SQL data source and put all that in there.
Yeah, sure. But the idea is if you have the JSON that creates the field, you can modify the JSON however you need to.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think it's as easy as what I just showed, copy and paste it in, and you know, then you could dynamically manipulate your JSON before instead of that. But I think that's the pattern of what you need to put in there. I've done it once, but it's been a while. All right, man, that whole topic, between what you guys had in mind and we only got one off the list, and there's a lot more. So anyway, good campfire. That's our hour. If anybody wants to stay after school, I think I'm going to have I think Jim and I have another question that I promised I'd get to him today. So I'm going to hang around for a few minutes, but other than that, we can call it as the end of the official campfire. So see you guys next week.
Good session today. Good to see you guys.
Yeah, nice to see you. Thank you so much, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thank you, Dale, for all you do.
Bet. Bye-bye.